I arrived at Ben's place in early September, when the wheat fields of northern France had just been harvested, leaving behind ragged stubble and the scent of dry straw drifting in the wind. His village sat along a narrow provincial road, flanked on both sides by low, moss-covered stone walls. Ben's house was at the edge of the village, grey stone walls, a dark red tile roof missing a few shingles, wooden shutters once painted green, now faded by weather, and a long garden stretching out back until it met a row of old chestnut trees that marked the boundary between his property and a sloping field beyond. The tallest chestnut stood right against the fence, its thick branch extending horizontally, almost brushing the window of the second floor. In the day, it looked peaceful, a leafy arch. At night, it turned into a solid black shape casting a shadow across the lawn, like a dark arm laid against the back of the house. Ben worked remotely for a design firm, so he spent most of his time at home. He was the tidy sort. Work shoes lined neatly by the door, the kettle always in its spot by the stove, hand towels folded into perfect squares. I'd brought him some coffee from Paris. He traded me a few Calville apples fresh from his garden. That afternoon, the rain had just stopped. The smell of damp earth mixed the scent of old wood in the house. The living room was warm from the fire crackling in the hearth, logs popping softly like corn kernels. Ben poured tea into 2 thick mugs, the steam curling up with the scent of honey. "It gets dark quickly here," Ben said, gesturing toward the window, where the light was already fading on the horizon. "By 10, it's pitch black. You can hear everything. Good. I sleep better than I do in the city," I replied, cupping the mug to warm my chilled wrists. That first night, I slept in the upstairs room, the one with the window looking directly at the chestnut tree. The mattress was soft. The blanket smelled of sun. I woke once, near midnight, to the sound of wind brushing the roof and rainwater dripping in slow, steady drops. I rolled over, pulled the blanket up, exhaled a thin breath into the cool air, and went back to sleep. Nothing worth noting. The second night, around 11:15, Ben and I were sitting in the living room. The small radio on the shelf was playing an old jazz track, the trumpet sounding lazy and soft. Ben got up to refill the kettle. I leaned back in my chair, eyes half closed. Among the familiar sounds, the radio, the fire's murmur, the faint hiss of steam, something else slipped in, so faint that if I hadn't been still, I might have missed it. I opened my eyes, tilted my head toward the back door. It was a long, steady whisper, without clear words, as if someone were speaking very softly to someone else. Short phrases, longer phrases, pauses, resuming again. It was coming from somewhere behind the house. Ben came back, and I lowered my voice. "Do you hear that?" He froze, eyes toward the window, tilting his head, his brow furrowed. "Yeah, sounds like someone talking. Outside." We looked at each other for a few seconds. Neither of us said it's just the wind. There's some sounds you can't mistake. But after maybe half a minute, it cut off sharply. We waited. It didn't return. Ben shrugged, set the kettle down. The fire popped loudly, filling the room again. "A neighbor?" I asked, though I knew the nearest house was more than 100 meters away. "Oh, the direction," Ben replied. "Could be someone passing on the back lane. Let's keep an ear out." On the third night, it came earlier, around 10:30. We switched the radio off. The space seemed to expand in the silence between sounds. The whisper stretched longer, the pauses deliberate, then drifting away before returning again. I sat up straighter, realizing it didn't spread like wind, but focused from a single direction. Both of us turned our heads toward the kitchen window, which looked out over the back garden. "It's closer than last night," Ben whispered. "I think so too." The back of my neck prickled. Not fear exactly, but the sensation of being called to pay attention. When it vanished again, I heard the wall clock mark 11 with crisp, separate beats, each one sitting in a thick, cottony silence. On the fourth night, it started even earlier, just after 9:30. This time it was clearer, more distinct. The whisper had a rhythm, certain tones repeating as if one voice was echoing another. I glanced at Ben. He exhaled, set his teacup down, and stood. "Let's go out and check. If we don't see anything, at least we'll know." We put on light jackets, each taking a small flashlight. When Ben opened the back door, cold air poured through the gap, brushing the back of my neck like a damp hand. The scent of wet soil, freshly cut grass, and wood that had soaked up a whole season's rain mixed together. The wooden porch steps were slick, creaking faintly as we stepped down. The lawn was damp and soft, making a muted swish under our shoes. The moment we stepped onto the grass, the whisper was louder, as if it had been lowered closer to the ground. It wasn't echoing through space, it was falling straight from above. We followed the stone path to the fence. Our flashlight swept over lavender bushes, the frame of an old wooden swing, and finally landed on the chestnut tree's trunk. The bark was dark, rough, streaked with moss. Raindrops still clung to the leaves. The big branch stretched out toward the second-floor window. There was nothing there. No figure, no animal. But the whisper was steady, like a constant stream. "Nightbird," I offered, though I knew it wasn't. "Not many around here. And this..." Ben shook his head. "It sounds like two people trying to talk quietly so a third person won't hear." We stood still, heads tilted back, listening. There was no wind, but a few leaves trembled as if something had brushed past. The strangest thing, the sound didn't change as we moved closer. Not louder, not softer, as if our presence had no influence. And it didn't have the natural push at the start of a breath or the sharpness of consonants. It simply flowed, stopped, then flowed again. Then it stopped entirely. Everything fell silent as though someone had flicked off a switch. We held our breath. After a long pause, tap. A dry, small sound, like a fingernail against wood. Once, twice, 3 times. Not loud, but enough to make my grip on the flashlight tighten until my knuckles felt stiff. Ben lowered his light slightly and said, so quietly I could see it more than hear it, "Let's go inside." We backed away, eyes still on the branch until we were through the door, shutting it firmly. I leaned my back against the wood, feeling the cold seep through my jacket. Neither of us said another word. That night, I lay awake for a long time, heart thudding in my ears, but the whisper didn't return. The next morning, the sun rose late, and dew clung to the rose bushes. We went out to the garden. Directly under the branch, from last night, the bark had been scraped smooth in a neat, round patch the size of a bowl. A few thin flakes of bark lay on the ground, so fresh they still smelled faintly of resin. I touched the smooth patch. It was cold and damp, as if coated in a thin, oily film. Ben stood opposite me, staring at the mark for a long time. He said nothing. We walked back inside in silence. From then on, our routine revolved around the possibility that the whisper would come. Daytime was normal. Ben worked. I read, watered the plants, aired out the bedding. But by late afternoon, we spoke less, listened more. Every creak of the water pipes, every sigh of wind down the chimney, every bird flapping somewhere nearby, each made us glance at each other before relaxing when it wasn't that sound. On the 5th night, the whisper didn't come at all. We stayed up until midnight, the kettle refilled twice, the fire burning down to embers. Each time the house settled with a faint pop, we looked at each other. Midnight passed, then 1 in the morning, and the air felt almost disappointing. On the 6th night, it came back. Not only back, it was closer. I was in the upstairs room, writing in a notebook when it started. No warm-up, no drifting in like before. Just there, sudden, low, steady, right outside the window. My pen stopped. The 2nd floor glass reflected only my own face, pale against the dim light of the desk lamp. But beyond that, in the dark, the branch swayed just enough to make the leaves shiver. "Ben!" I called, my voice quieter than I meant. His footsteps came quickly up the stairs. He stepped into the room, glanced at me, then moved straight to the window. His eyes shifted from the glass to the black shape of the branch. The whisper was steady, right above us. "It's on the branch," he said, and I could feel the skin on my arms tighten. We didn't talk about whether to check. It was a given. This was the closest it had been, and we couldn't ignore it anymore. We took our flashlights and went out the back door again. The night air was sharp, colder than before. My breath came out in small clouds. The grass was slick under my shoes, and I could smell the metallic tang of damp leaves. The whisper didn't fade as we walked away from the house. It stayed constant, as if it was moving with us or waiting for us. We stopped under the tree. The branch was just above head height here, thick and solid, the kind of branch that could take the weight of a grown man. The whisper now had texture, not just the sound of voices, but an occasional rustle, like fabric brushing against bark. Ben aimed his light along the branch. It illuminated the knots in the wood, the sheen of wet moss, but nothing else. The sound didn't falter. I tilted my head, trying to separate the tones. One was slightly higher, one lower, trading short bursts like they were agreeing on something. And then, silence. The stillness was heavy. The smell of resin was stronger than before, as if something had just been scraped open. I felt the urge to step back, but before I could move, there came the dry tap again, sharper this time, once, twice. Then a slow, dragging sound like something being pulled across the bark above our heads. Ben's beam flicked upward, leaves shifted just slightly, but no shape, no shadow other than what the branches already made. "Enough," Ben said, his voice steady but tight. We walked back to the house, the whisper absent now, replaced only by the crunch of gravel underfoot as we crossed the porch. That night, I dreamed I was standing at the window, looking down at the branch. In the dream, there was a shape crouched there, leaning close to the glass, whispering, but no words came out, just the same steady hiss. When I woke, it was just past 3 in the morning. The house was silent, but the dream stayed lodged in my chest like a cold stone.